Okay, and I'm back. I haven't decided if I want to put all of these little clips together into one long video or to keep them separate. I think there's something quite nice about the on-off. But I don't know, this, if I keep it all together, then you can just stop wherever you want and then start again. Maybe that's fine. But I just got back from work. Where did we end off? Oh. Beyond the town centre, the seam sprawled out for miles, the regular streets quickly dissolving into a web of smaller, unmarked lanes that rose up and then petered out for no discernible reason. Some boasted rows of worn, identical houses. Others had makeshift structures it would be generous to call shacks. Many homes were so shored up, patched up, or broken down that their original framework was nothing but a memory. Many others had been abandoned and scavenged for their parts. With no grid, no landmark of note, Coriolanus lost his bearings almost immediately, and his unease returned. Once in a while they'd pass someone sitting on their stoop or in the shade of their homes. None of them looked the least bit friendly. The only sociable creatures were the gnats, whose fascination with his injured lip required constant shoeing. As the sun beat down on them, condensation from the melting bag of ice left a splotch on his pant leg. Coriolanus' enthusiasm began dissolving as well. The intoxication he'd experienced the night before in the hob, the heady mix of liquor and yearning, seemed like a feverish dream now. Maybe this is a bad idea. Really? Asked Sejanus. I'm pretty sure we're headed in the right direction. See the trees over there? Coriolanus made out a fringe of green in the distance. He trudged along, thinking with fondness of his bunk, remembering that Sunday meant fried bologna and potatoes. Maybe he was not cut out to be a lover. Maybe he was more of a loner at heart. Coriolanus Snow, more loner than lover. One thing about Pinny Torp, he reeked of passionate feelings. Is that what Lucy Gray wanted? Passion, music, liquor, moonlight, and a wild boy who embraced them all. Not a perspiring peacekeeper showing up at her door on a Sunday morning with a split lip and a sagging bag of ice. He gave over the lead to Sejanus, following him up and down cinder paths without comment. Eventually his companion would grow tired, and they could go back and catch up on their letter writing. Sejanus, Tigris, his friends, the faculty, all of them had been dead wrong about him. He'd never been motivated by love or ambition, only a desire to get his prize and a nice, quiet, bureaucratic job, pushing papers around and leaving him plenty of time to attend tea parties. Cowardly and... what had Dean Highbottom called her? Oh, yes, vapid like his mother. What a disappointment he'd have been to Crassus Xanthos Snow. What a name. Listen, said Sejanus, catching his arm. Coriolanus paused and lifted his head. A high-pitched voice pierced the morning air with a melancholy tune. Maud Ivory. They made for the source of the music. At the end of a path at the edge of the seam, a small wooden house tilted at a precarious angle like a tree in a stiff wind. The dirt patch of a front yard was deserted, so they picked their way around the clumps of wildflowers in various states of bloom and decay that appeared to have been transplanted without much rhyme or reason. When they reached the back of the house, they discovered Maud Ivory sitting on a makeshift stoop in an old dress 2 sizes too big for her. She was cracking nuts on a cinder block with a rock, beating time to her song. Oh, my darling, crack. Oh, my darling, crack. Oh, my darling Clementine, crack. She looked up and grinned when she saw them. I know you. Brushing the stray nutshells from her frock, she ran into the house. Coriolanus wiped his face on a sleeve, hoping his lip wouldn't look too bad when Lucy Gray appeared. Instead, Maud Ivory came out with a sleepy Barbe Azure, who had twisted her hair up in a hasty knot. Like Maud Ivory, she changed her costume for a dress you might see on anyone in District 12. Good morning, she said. You're looking for Lucy Gray? He's her friend from the capital, Maud Ivory reminded her. The one who introduced her on the television, only he's near bald now. He gave me the popcorn balls. Well, we certainly enjoyed those, and appreciate all you did for Lucy Gray, said Barbe Azure. I expect you'll find her down in the meadow. That's where she goes early to work, so as to not disturb the neighbours. I'll show you. Let me. Maud Ivory hopped off the porch and took Coriolanus' hand as if they were old friends. It's this way. With no younger siblings or relatives, Coriolanus had little experience with children, but it made him feel special the way she'd attached himself to him, the cool little hand pressed trustingly into his. So, you saw me on the television? Just the one night. It was clear, and Tam Amber used a lot of foil. Usually we can't get anything but static, but it's special we even have a television, explained Maud Ivory. Most don't. Not that there's much to watch but the boring old news anyways. Dr. Gould could go on all she wanted about engaging people in the Hunger Games, but if practically no one in the districts had a working television, the impact would be confined to the reapings, where everyone gathered in public. While they walked toward the woods, Maud Ivory rattled on about their show the night before and the fight that followed. Sorry you got punched, she said, pointing to his lip. That's Billy Torp, though. Where he goes, trouble follows. Is he your brother? Asked Sejanus. Oh no, he's a Clade. Him and Clark Carmine are brothers. The rest of us are all Baird cousins. The girls, I mean. And Tam Amber's a lost soul, said Maud Ivory matter-of-factly. So Lucy Gray didn't have a monopoly on the strange manner of talking. It must be a Covey thing. A lost soul? Asked Coriolanus. Sure, the Covey found Tam Amber when he was just a baby. Someone left him in a cardboard box on the side of the road. So he's ours. Joke's on them too, because he's the finest picker alive, Maud Ivory declared. Not much of a talker though. Is that ice? Coriolanus swung the diminishing clump of cubes. What's left of it? Oh, Lucy Gray will like that. We've got a fridge, but the freezer's long broke, said Maud Ivory. Seems fancy to have ice in summertime, like flowers in wintertime. Rare. Coriolanus agreed. My grandmother grows roses in winter. People make a big fuss over them. Lucy Gray said you smelled like roses, said Maud Ivory. Is your whole house full of them? She grows them on the roof, Coriolanus told her. The roof, giggled Maud Ivory. That's a silly place for flowers. Don't they slide off? It's a flat roof, very high, with lots of sunlight, he said. You can see the whole Capitol from there. Lucy Gray didn't like the Capitol. They tried to kill us, said Maud Ivory. Yes, he acknowledged. It couldn't have been very nice for her. She said you were the only good thing about it, and now you're here. Maud Ivory gave his hand a tug. You're going to stay here, right? That's the plan, said Coriolanus. I'm glad. I like you, and that will make her happy, she said. By this time, the three had reached the edges of a large field that dipped down to the woods. Unlike the weedy expanse in front of the hanging tree, this one had a clean, fresh, high grass, and swaths of bright wildflowers. There she is, with Seamus. Maud Ivory pointed to a lone figure on a rock, wearing a dress of a namesake colour, and Lucy Gray sat with her back to them, her head bent over a guitar. Seamus? Who was Seamus? Another member of the Covey? Or had he misread Billy Torp's role in her life, and Seamus was the lover? Coriolanus put a hand above his eyes to shield them from the sunlight, but could only make out her figure. Seamus? She's our goat. Don't be fooled by the boy's name. She can give a gallon a day when she's fresh, said Maud Ivory. We're trying to skim enough cream for butter, but it takes forever. Oh, I love butter, said Sejanus. That reminds me, I forgot to give you this bread. Did you have your breakfast already? It's a fact I didn't, said Maud Ivory, eyeing the loaf with interest. Sejanus handed it over. What do you say we head back to the house and enjoy and break into this now? Maud Ivory tucked the bread under her arm. What about Lucy Gray and this one? She asked, nodding at Coriolanus. They can join us after they've caught up, said Sejanus. Okay, she agreed, transferring her hand to Sejanus's. Barb Azure might make us wait for them. You could help me shell nuts first if you want. They're last year's, but nobody's gotten sick yet. Well, that's the best offer I've had in a long time, Sejanus turned to Coriolanus. We'll see you later? Coriolanus felt self-conscious. Do I look okay? Gorgeous. Trust me, that lip's working for you, soldier, said Sejanus, and he headed back towards the house with Maud Ivory. Coriolanus gave his hair a swipe and waded into the meadow. He'd never walked in such high grass, and the sensation of it tickling his fingertips, added to his nervousness. It far exceeded his hopes, getting to meet up with her in private in a flower-filled field, with the whole day ahead. Just the opposite of what the rushed encounter in the filthy hob would have been. This was, for the lack of a better word, romantic. He moved forward as quietly as possible. As a rule, she mystified him, and he welcomed the chance to observe her without her usual defences in place. Drawing close, he took in the song she sang. She quietly strummed her guitar. Are you? Oh no, it's this one. Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man? They say he murdered 3. Strange things did happen here, no stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree. He didn't recognize it, but it brought to mind the hanging of the rebel 2 days before. Had she been there? Had it prompted this? Are you coming to the tree with the dead man caught out for his love to flee? Strange things did happen here, no stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree. Ah, yes, it was Arlo's hanging, because where else would a dead man call out for his love to flee? Run, Lil, run. You'd need those unnatural mocking jays for that. But who was she inviting to meet her in the tree? Could it be him? Maybe she planned to sing this next Saturday as a secret message for him to meet at midnight in the hanging tree. Thought that he could, as he'd never be allowed off base at that hour. But she probably didn't know that. Lucy Gray hummed now, testing out different chords behind the melody, while he admired the curve of her neck, the finesse of her skin, the fineness of her skin. As he drew nearer, his foot landed on an old branch, which broke with a sharp snap. She sprang from the rock, twisting her body as she rose, her eyes wide with fear and the guitar held out as if to block a blow. For a moment he thought she'd flee, but her alarm shifted to relief at the sight of him. She shook her head, as close as he'd ever seen her to embarrassment, as she propped her guitar against the rock. Sorry, still got one foot in the arena. In his brief foray in the games, if his brief foray in the games had left him nervous and nightmarish, he could only imagine how damaged she was. The last month had upended their lives and changed them irrevocably. Sad, really, as they were both rather exceptional people for whom the world had reserved its harshest treatment. Yes, it leaves quite an impression, he said. They stood for a moment, drinking each other in, before they moved together. The bag of ice slid from his hand as she wrapped her arms around him, melting her body into his. He locked her in an embrace, remembering how scared he'd been for her, for himself, and how he hadn't dared fantasize about this moment, as it had seemed so unattainable. But here they were, safe in a beautiful meadow, 2,000 miles away from the arena, awash in daylight, but none between them. You found me, she said. In District 12? In Panem? In the world itself? Never mind, it didn't matter. You knew I would. Hoped you would. Didn't know. The odds didn't seem in my favour. She leaned back enough to free her hand and brushed his lips with her finger. He felt the calluses from her guitar strings, the soft surrounding skin, as she examined the previous night's injury. Then, almost shyly, she kissed him, sending shockwaves through his body. Ignoring the pain in his lips, he responded, hungry and curious, every nerve in his body awake. He kissed her until his lips started to bleed a little, and he would have kept going had she not pulled away. Here, she said. Come in the shade. The remaining ice cracked under his foot, and he retrieved it. For you. Why, thank you. Lucy Grace drew him over to sit at the base of the rock. Taking the bag, she bit off a corner of the plastic to make a tiny hole, and lifted it high to let the melted ice water drip into her mouth. Ah, this must be the only cold thing this side of November. Her hand squeezed the bag, sending a light spray over her face. It's wonderful. Lean back. He tilted his head back and felt the stuff drizzle over his lips, licking it off just in time for another long kiss. Then she drew up her knees and said, So, Coriolanus Snow, what are you doing in my meadow? What indeed? Just spending some time with my girl, he answered. I can hardly believe it. Lucy Gray surveyed the meadow. Nothing here since the reaping has seemed very real, and the games were just a nightmare. For me too, he said, but I want to hear what happened to you, off camera. They sat side by side, shoulders, ribs, and hips pressed together, hands entwined, sharing stories as they shared the ice water. Lucy Gray began with an account of the opening days of the games, where she'd hidden with a progressively more rabid Jessup. We kept moving from spot to spot in these tunnels. It's like a maze down there, and poor Jessup kept getting sicker and crazier by the minute. That first night, we bedded down near the entrance. That was you, wasn't it, who came to move Marcus? It was me and Sejanus. He snuck into, well, I'm not even sure what, but to make some sort of statement. They sent me in to retrieve him, Coriolanus explained. Was it you who killed Bobbin? She asked quietly. He nodded. Didn't have a choice. And there were 3 others, and then 3 of the others tried to kill me. Her face darkened. I know. I could hear them boasting when they came back from the turnstiles. I thought you might be dead. Scared me, the thought of losing you. I didn't draw a breath until you sent in the water. Then you know what every moment was like for me, Coriolanus said. You were all I could think about. You too. She flexed her fingers. I clutched that compact so hard you could see the imprint of the rose on my palm. He caught her hand and kissed the palm. I wanted so badly to help, and I felt so useless. She caressed his cheek. Oh no. I could feel you looking out for me. With the water and the food, and believe me, taking out Bobbin was major, even though I know it must have been awful for you. It sure was for me. Lucy Gray admitted to 3 of her own kills. First Wovey, although that had not been targeted. She'd merely positioned a bottle of water with a few swallows and a bit of powder as if it had been dropped accidentally in the tunnels, and Wovey had been the one to find it. I was gunning for Coral. She claimed Reaper, whose puddle she'd poisoned, had contracted rabies when Jessup spat in his eye at the zoo. So that was really a mercy killing. I spared him what Jessup went through. And taking out Treach with that viper was self-defense. Still not sure why those snakes loved me so. Not convinced it was my singings. Snakes don't even hear well. And so he told her about the lab and Clemencia and Dr. Gaule's plan to release the snakes into the arena, and how he'd secretly dropped his handkerchief, his father's handkerchief, into the tank so that they could become accustomed to her scents. But they found it, loaded with DNA from both of us. And that's why you're here? Not the rat poison in the compact? Yes, he said. You covered beautifully for me on that one. Did my best. She considered things for a minute. Well, that's it then. I saved you from the fire, and you saved me from the snakes. We're responsible for each other's lives now. Are we? He asked. Sure, she said. You're mine, and I'm yours. It's written in the stars. No escaping that. He leaned over and kissed her, flushed with happiness, because although he did not believe in celestial writings, she did, and that would be enough to guarantee her loyalty. Not that his own loyalty was in question. If he hadn't fallen in love with any of the girls in the capital, it was unlikely District 12 could offer much else in the way of temptation. What the hell is this guy? He's just a shit guy. He's just a shit guy. A strange sensation at his neck called for attention, and he found Seamus sampling his collar. Oh, hello. Can I help you, madame? Lucy Gray laughed. Happens you can. If you a mind to. She needs milking. Milking? I'm not even sure where to begin, he said. With a bucket. Up at the house. She squirted a bit of ice water in Seamus's direction, and the goat released the collar. Tearing the bag, she took the last couple of cubes, popping one in Carlanius's mouth and one in her own. Sure is nice to have ice this time of year. A luxury in summer and a curse in the winter. Can't you just ignore it? Asked Carlanius. Not around here. In January our pipes froze and we had to melt down chunks of ice for water on the stove. For 6 people and a goat, you'd be surprised how much work that takes. It was better once the snow came. That melts pretty quick. Lucy Gray took Seamus's lead rope and picked up her guitar. I got it. Carlanius reached for the instrument. Then he wondered if she trusted him with it. Lucy Gray easily handed it over. Not as nice as the one Pluribus loaned us, but it pays for our keep. Only thing is, we're running low on strings, and the homemade ones don't cut it. Do you think, if I wrote to him, he could send me a few? I bet he has some left over from when he ran his club. I can pay. I've still got most of the money Dean Highbottom gave us. Carlanius stopped in his tracks. Dean Highbottom? Dean Highbottom gave you money? He did, but it was kind of unquiet. First, he apologised for what I've been through. Then he stuffed a wad of cash into my pocket. Glad to have it. The covey didn't perform while I was gone. Too shook up over losing me, she said. Anyway, I can pay for those strings if he's a mind to help. Carlanius promised to ask in his next letter, but the news of Dean Highbottom's covert generosity threw him. Why would even Incarnate help his girlfriend? Respect? Pity? Guilt? Morphling-induced whimsy? He mulled it over as they made their way to her front porch, where she hitched Seamus to a pole. Who is this? Oh, it's you. I can't believe you're interrupting this reading session. Damn. Just like if this was happening in the flesh. Constant interruptions. What will I do with you? Come on in, meet the family. Lucy Gray took his hand and led him to the door. How's Tigris? I sure wish I could have thanked her in person for the soap in my dress. Now that I'm home, I meant to send her a letter, and maybe a song if I come up with something good enough. She'd like that, said Carlanius. Things aren't going so well at home. I'm sure they miss you. Is it more than that? She asked. Before he could answer, they'd entered the house. It consisted of one large open room and what seemed like a sleeping area up in the loft. Along the back, a coal stove, a sink, a shelf of dishware, and an ancient refrigerator designated the kitchen. A rack of costumes lined the right wall, with a collection of instruments to the left. An old television with an oversized antenna that branched out like antlers, rigged with twisted pieces of aluminium foil, sat on the crate. Other than some chairs and a table, the place was bare of furniture. Tamama leaned back on one of the chairs, holding his mandolin on his lap but not playing. Clerk Carmine hung his head off the loft, gazing unhappily at Barb Azure and Maud Ivory, who seemed to have worked herself into a state of indignation. At the sight of them, she shot across the floor and started pulling Lucy Gray towards the window that looked out over the backyard. "Lucy Gray, he's making trouble again." "You let him in?" Lucy Gray asked, seeming to know what she meant. "No, said he just wanted the rest of his stuff. We threw it out back," said Barb Azure, her arms crossed in disapproval. "So, what's the problem?" Lucy Gray spoke calmly, but Coriolanus could feel her grip tighten. "That," said Barb Azure, nodding out the back window. Still in tow, Coriolanus followed Lucy Gray and looked into the backyard. Maud Ivory wriggled in between them. "Sejanus is supposed to be helping me with the nuts." Billy Torp knelt on the ground, a pile of clothes and a few books beside him. He was talking rapidly as he scraped out some kind of picture in the dirt. Periodically, he'd gesture, pointing this way and that. Across from him, down on one knee, Sejanus listened intently, nodding in understanding and occasionally throwing in a question. With the sight of Billy Torp in what he now considered his territory annoyed him. It's just the worst character. Coriolanus. Awful guy. Coriolanus did not see much cause for concern. He could not imagine what he and Sejanus had to discuss. Perhaps they'd found some mutual grievances, like how their families didn't understand them, to whine about. "Are you worried about Sejanus? He's fine. He talks to anyone." Coriolanus tried but failed to make out Billy Torp's picture in the dirt. "What's he drawing?" "Looks like he's giving some sort of direction," said Barb Azure, relieving him of the guitar. "And if I'm right, your friend needs to go home." "I'll take care of it." Lucy Gray started to release Coriolanus' hand, but he hung on. "Thanks, but you don't need to deal with all my baggage." "It's in the stars, I guess," Coriolanus said with a smile. It was time anyway that he confronted Billy Torp and laid down a few rules. Billy Torp had to accept that Lucy Gray was no longer his, but belonged firmly and for always to Coriolanus. Lucy Gray didn't answer, but she stopped trying to free her hand. As they walked quietly through the open back door, the brightness of the August sun, now climbing high in the sky, made him squint. So engrossed was the pair that it was not until he and Lucy Gray stood directly over them that Billy Torp reacted, swiping the picture from the dirt with his hand. Without Barb Azure's tip-off, Coriolanus might have been clueless, but as it was, he recognized the image almost immediately. It was a map of the base. Chapter 25. Sejanus startled in what Coriolanus couldn't help thinking was a guilty manner, getting rapidly to his feet as he brushed the dust from his uniform. Billy Torp, on the other hand, rose slowly, almost lazily, to confront them. "Well, look who's decided to talk to me," he said, grinning uneasily at Lucy Gray. Was this the first time they'd spoken since the Hunger Games? "Sejanus, Maud Ivory's all bent out of shape about you bailing on those nuts," she said. "Yes, I've been shirking my duties." Sejanus held out his hand to Billy Torp, who didn't hesitate to give it a shake. "Nice meeting you." "Sure, you too. You can find me around the hop some days if you want to talk more," Billy Torp replied. "I'll keep it in mind," said Sejanus, making for the house. Lucy Gray released Coriolanus' hand and squared her shoulders with Billy Torp's. "Go away, Billy Torp, and don't come back." "Oh, what, Lucy Gray? You'll sick your peacekeepers on me?" He laughed. "If need be," she said. Billy Torp glanced over at Coriolanus. "Seem like a pretty tame pair." "You don't get it. There's no walking this back," said Lucy Gray. Billy Torp turned angry. "You know I didn't try and kill you." "You're still running with that girl that did," Lucy Gray shot back. "Here you've made yourself right at home at the mayor's. And who sent me there in the first place, I wonder? Makes me sick how you're playing the kids. Poor Lucy Gray, poor lamb, he sneered. They're not stupid. They want you gone too, she spat out. Billy Torp's hand whipped out, grabbing her wrist and pulling her against him. Where exactly am I supposed to go? Before Coriolanus could intervene, Lucy Gray sank her teeth into Billy Torp's hand, causing him to yelp and release her. He glared at Coriolanus. He'd stepped up protectively beside her. Doesn't look like you're so lonely yourself. This your fancy man from the capital? Chased all this way after you? He's got a few surprises waiting for him. I already know all about you. Coriolanus didn't really, but it made him feel at less of a disadvantage. Billy Torp gave a disbelieving... Oh. Was that paused? Billy Torp gave a disbelieving laugh. Me? I'm the rosebud in the dung heap. Why don't you let go? Why don't you go, like she asked, said Coriolanus coldly. Fine, you'll learn. Billy Torp gathered his possessions into his arms. You'll learn soon enough. He strode off into the hot morning. Lucy Gray watched him go, rubbing the wrist he'd grabbed. If you want to run, now's the time. I don't want to run, said Coriolanus, although the exchange had been unsettling. He's a liar and a louse. Sure, I flirt with anybody. It's part of my job, but what he's implying, that just isn't true. Lucy Gray looked over at the window. And what if it was? What if it was that, or letting Maud Ivory starve? Neither of us would have let that happen, no matter what it took. Only he's got a different set of rules for him than for me, like always. What makes him a victim makes me trash. Okay, I think we're going to need to leave this here, because I just got a message about my rota. Very sorry. Back in a second. Bye.